And that sounds like it's a note payable rather than accounts payable, which will be in a normal business transaction when we buy stuff like inventory. So this is going to be a note. We already know we're going to credit it because we debited cash, but let's think it through. All liabilities generally have credit balances. The bad thing needs to go up because we owe more money. How do we make something go up? We do the same thing to it, which in this case is another credit. So that does make sense that we will credit it. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to paste it in C9, right click, paste it 1, 2, 3. So note that if we start getting good at cash, which we will because we're going to hit cash a lot, then we'll know what the other side will be doing. And then I highly recommend thinking through why the other side is doing what the other side is doing. So here's the journal entry. Should look exactly like that. Make sure you have the debit and the credit represented, positive, negative. And then I'm going to make the taskbar go down, back down again to 70. We're going to post this journal entry to the general ledger. So this is the general ledger over here. We're going to post cash first. Cash is on top. So it's going to be the first account on the general ledger. We're going to go to the next open space under the first transaction or the latest transaction we had in the cash. And it's going to go up again. So we're in the debit column. I'm in cell T10. T10 equals, and we're going to point to the 8,000 here. Once we hit enter, the 3,000 is going to go up because a debit and a debit makes a debit account go up to the 11,000. Now we're going to go to the notes payable account and post that. Obviously we're out of bounds, by the way. We're out of bounds here. We're out of bounds here. Out of bounds here because we only posted 1/2 of it so far. Who do we owe that 8,000 to? Notes payable, third party, liability. That account is down here. It's in the orange section. So we're looking at for the orange section in the general ledger. It's going to be in the credit column. So I'm in AG22. AG22. We're going to select equals. It's going to point to that 8,000. And that's going to make this go, I'm going to say it goes up when we hit enter in the credit direction. So we're not going in the whole, don't think of it as a negative number. Think of it as increasing in the credit direction. And it increases because a credit balance increases a credit balance. The same thing will make it go up. And we could see that 8,000 here. So now we have 11,000 of cash. Who do we owe that to? 8,000 to the bank, 3,000 to us. And we can see that represented in assets, liabilities, and equity. Equity being the book value because assets of 11 minus the liabilities also equals the book value of 3,000. All right, let's make this larger again. I'm going to go back up to our taskbar, back up to 100%. We're going to scroll over to the left-hand side. Take a look at the next transaction, which happens on 7/5. So we'll type in the 7/5 here. And what happens, we have the money now. Now we're going to buy stuff with it. And the first thing we're going to buy is a truck. So we purchased a truck for cash. All right, so in this case, go through our same questions. Is cash affected? Yeah, we paid cash for the truck. And cash has a debit balance. How do we make something go down? We do the opposite thing to it as what it is. So cash has a debit represented by the fact that it does not have brackets around it. We're going to make it go down by doing the opposite thing to it, which in this case is a credit. So I'm going to still think about cash first. I'm going to copy that, even though we're going to credit cash. So I'm not going to think about what's the debit going to be, even though the debit always goes on top. I'm going to think about cash first because it's probably easier to do so. So here's the cash, here's the date. I'm going to put it on the bottom of the date. So I'm on C12 because the credits traditionally go on the bottom. So I'm going to right click and paste that 1, 2, 3. We're going to go in the credit column. So I'm in E12. We're going to represent the credit with a negative. Put in the amount we're going to pay, 5,000. No formatting in there. We're just going to select enter and it'll format for us. Then we're going to go, if we credit something, we're also going to debit something. So I'm going to go to the debit side now and just type in the same 5,000 and a positive number. So we have an equal number of debits and credits. Then, of course, we're just going to say, well, what should that account be? And if we bought a truck, we could just call it truck. We could decide what to name it. We could just call it auto as well, because we might buy other autos later on after we get better and do more stuff, or we could call it equipment or something like that, but we're going to call it auto in this case. Notice it's up here in the assets section. And you might be asking, well, why is it an asset and not an expense? Why isn't it auto expense? I see an auto expense down here. And the reason for that is that if we're going to buy something large that's going to affect multiple periods, then we want to put it in an asset and then depreciate it or expense it as we go. Why? Because think about the fact that if we put this 5,000 down here and that was a significant purchase for us, what would happen to net income in this month it would probably bring net income way down by that large purchase. So if I compared this month's net income to next month's net income, next month would probably look way better because we would not have that purchase in it. But in reality, we didn't do a lot better. We're still using that car on both months. So the idea is that we should really be allocating the cost, the purchase of this car, over the useful life, which we'll talk about when we go to the depreciation. Therefore, we're going to put it on as an asset and then allocate that cost as we go. So the asset has a debit balance. We got more of it. So we need to make it go up. How do we make it go up? We do the same thing to it, which in this case is another debit. So I'm going to copy that, put that on top, right click, paste 1, 2, 3. Note we already knew we were going to debit it because we credited cash. And now we can post this out. So I'm going to make this small on the taskbar again. I'm going to bring this back down to about 70. I'm going to scroll over here so we can see what we're doing. I'm going to post the car first. So here's the car on the auto. Here's the auto. It's like, what is that? The 5th account in the green accounts, which are assets. So we're looking for auto. Here it is over here in AB9. We want to be in the debit side. So I'm on the debit side. We're going to select equals and then point to that 9,000 in cell D11. When we select enter, this will go up to the 5,000 here. Now we're out of balance by 5,000, of course. We can see the 5,000 in the trial balance. We are now going to post the cash half. So here's the cash. That's our first account that we're going to see being selected a lot. It's on the credit side. So here's cash on the GL. Credit side equals. We're going to point to that 5,000 credit. And that'll bring the 11 down by 5,000 to 6,000. Why? Because this is a debit balance account and we did the opposite thing to it, crediting it, making the balance go down. So notice this is just a running balance. If I highlight these, this plus this minus this, taskbar adds up to 6,000. All right, next transaction, I'm going to make this a bit larger again. We're going to go back up to the 100%, scroll back over. We are now on, what's the next transaction? 7.5 again. All right, so we have now purchased a lawnmower and garden tools from LH&G Company on account to be paid at a later date. So we're going to record that transaction. The first question once again is cash affected? And in this case, no, it's not affected. We purchased it on account. So we didn't pay cash for it. We paid for it kind of like on a credit card. We're going to call that account accounts payable. So here's accounts payable. Now we know it's going to be accounts payable, but we might not know which way it should go. So we might want to think about what we got, because what we got could be an asset. And if it is, then we can kind of think about what we're going to do in a similar fashion as with cash. So we're going to purchase a lawnmower. I'm going to call that lawnmower an asset up here, lawn equipment. We're going to put it into our equipment account so that we can put other purchases in the similar account. And you might be asking, well, why don't you put the equipment as an expense? So notice this is a liability, not an expense. And the answer to that is that the equipment accounts are usually going to be larger pieces of equipment. So if we buy larger pieces of equipment, we're going to want to put them on as an asset and then expense them as we use them. The rationale for that is that note that if this expense is large, we purchase a very large item, then if we expense that large item in one time period, that would make our net income, which is income minus expenses, go way down. And on a cash basis, it's true. We paid for that stuff and it went way down. But it doesn't really make sense for us to compare a net income that would be very low in this month to a net income that might be a lot higher in the next month, simply because we purchased the equipment this month, because we're using the equipment next month as well. So to improve comparability in the accrual method, we're going to put the equipment on there as an asset, and then we are going to expense it as we use it or allocate the cost as we go. So we can see that the assets all have debit balances represented by the fact that they do not have brackets. We need to make it go up, so we're going to do the same thing to it. So here's the lawn equipment. I'm going to copy that. We're going to put our cursor in C14, right click, and paste it 1, 2, 3. So the equipment's going to go up by the purchase of the equipment, which was 1.5. If we debit something, we're also going to have to credit something, so we're going to credit the 1.5. So there we have this, and now we only need to know what account are we going to credit. And we already said we're going to credit accounts payable. Accounts payable is a liability account, and now we can think through why are we going to credit. Well, it has a credit balance in it, because all liabilities do. We need to make it go up. The bad thing's going up, we owe more money. How do we make something go up? We do the same thing to it, which in this case would be a credit. So I'm going to copy that. We're going to put that down here in C15, right click, and paste it 1, 2, 3. Okay, so now let's post this out. So we're going to make this smaller. I'm going to go to the taskbar, scroll it down to around 70. I'm going to scroll over here so we can see more of our screen. I'm going to post the lawn equipment. So here's the lawn equipment. Here it is on the trial balance. It's our third account, so it'll be the third account on the general ledger. Here's the general ledger. Here's the third account in X23. I'm sorry, we're down here in lawn equipment, which is down here, one of the second to last cash account. So that's down here in AB24. And I'm going to say equals and point to that 1005. So that's going to make the account go up in the debit direction to 1005. We'll see that 1005 here. We'll be out of balance here, here, and here till we post the other side to accounts payable. Accounts payable's right there. It's our first orange account on the general ledger. Here's the general ledger. Here's our first orange account. We want to be on the credit side, so I'm in AG9. Going to select equals and point to the 15 credit. That'll make this go up in the credit direction. We'll see that on the trial balance. We'll be back in balance over here. Now, we posted something to accounts payable. That says that we owe somebody money. In a later date, we're going to see that. We're going to say, we owe someone 1,500. And we can see more detail on that in terms of the general ledger, in terms of when we incurred that. But we can't say who we owe. So we need to track this same information for this particular account in terms of who we owe. And that's going to be called the subsidiary ledger. So if we scroll down here, we see another ledger, which is going to be the same information that'll be in the general ledger, but it's not in order by date now, it's ordered by who we owe, and here's the person we owe. So I'm just going to put that same credit down here in the accounts payable subsidiary ledger. I'm going to select an equals and point to this account. Don't point to the total, we got to point to the blue area and enter. And we'll see that information there now. So now, if we look at it in who we owe, we've got these 3 vendors, and they add up to 1,005. That's who we owe. That should be the same amount in the accounts payable here. That should be the same amount in our accounts payable here. So if we say, we owe someone 1,500, well, who do we owe? We can't check the GL too easily on that. We need to check the subsidiary ledger. All right, so let's make this a little bit larger and go to the next transaction. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, back to 100% over here. Scrolling back to the left-hand side, we are now on, once again, I think 7.5 again. Actually, 7.6 now, right? 7.6, all right. Purchase landscaping supplies from a company on account to be paid in the future. All right, so now we purchased landscaping supplies. And question, is cash affected? In this case, again, no, it's gonna be paid in the future, so we didn't pay any cash yet. So what are we gonna pay? Accounts payable. And we can see there, we can think about what it should be doing. Should we debit or credit that? But it might be easier to think about what we are getting again. And in this case, we're getting landscaping supplies. So we see landscaping supplies here. It's in the assets section. It's gonna act similar in that way to cash. Now, you might be asking, well, I see landscaping supply down here on the expense side as well. Why would we put it on as an asset and not an expense? And the answer to that is going to be if landscaping supply is relevant, it's the same kind of rationale as with the equipment. We should put it on as an asset and then allocate the landscaping supply as we use it rather than as when we pay for it. If landscaping supplies is not relevant or material to our expenses, and or if we're going to use it right away, it may be easier to just expense it. But if we want comparability to our financial statements, it would be better to put it on as an asset and then expense it as we go. This will also be an introduction to inventory, which will be done in a similar fashion as well. So we're going to put it on as an asset, we're going to count it at the end of the time period, then we're going to adjust the expense in our adjusting process at the end of the month. So we're going to put it on as an asset. Asset has a debit balance. We're going to make it go up by doing the same thing to it, which in this case would be another debit. So I'm going to right click on that. We're going to put that on top in cell C17, right click and paste it 1, 2, 3. Then what's the amount will be 185. If we debit something for 185, we're going to credit something. So I'm going to say negative 185 in the credit side. And what are we going to credit? Well, we just said we're going to credit accounts payable. So accounts payable going to be credited. Does that make sense? Well, accounts payable has a credit in it. We need to make it go up because we owe more money. How do we make something go up? We do the same thing to it, which in this case would be another credit. So I'm going to copy that. Going to put our cursor in C18, right click, paste it 1, 2, 3. All right, now we're going to post this out. I'm going to make this small